Welcome to the Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Hello.
Hey.
Guten Tag.
Aloha.
Hola. Shalom.
Hello.
Namaste.
Ni hao.
Privet.
Hello.
Salut. Yassas.
Salve.
Ciao.
Bonjour. Our podcast talks about the latest trends in the worlds of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Crypto and Blockchain Talk. And I have to tell you, I am so excited because this week I have Human Protocol's technical designer, Alex Newman. He is here to talk to us about so many amazing things, including their hCaptCHA product, which is being used by, I would say, billions of people around the world. And it's just an amazing story, not just about the people or even the person behind it, I should say. And Alex, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but well, we'll get to that in just a second, because I think, first of all, I have to say, Alex, welcome to Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Oh, thanks so much. This is great.
Oh, you have no idea. Okay, now I know that there's a lot to cover, and I want to get straight into it. So I'd like to start with kind of like what they do in Marvel, your origin story. How did you start? And give us this story and evolution of how you got to where you are with the Human Protocol today.
Yeah, that's great. So my background actually is traditionally not in the crypto space. I studied distributed systems, distributed database design. That was my background. I built a couple of startups around that and sold them. After I sold my third one, I was kind of looking for the next big thing, and I was using machine learning. It's back 2016, 2015. And one of the weird things about programming is it's very hard to get anything to work. And what I found about machine learning, especially the deep machine learning, is that it worked way better than you expected it. And it was really surprising. And at the time, a lot of people didn't know why it worked so well. There's still some questions out about why those algorithms perform so well. But I was super inspired. So I started showing up to all these different fancy VC parties, trying to learn from ML people. And I ended up meeting my co-founder at the time, Eli. And he instructed me that, I could help him on some machine learning projects if I worked for him for free. And, I was excited to have someone who had been working in the industry for a long time. And we started working with some of the largest ML cloud providers in the world to help solve their data needs. And we ended up kind of having to create these labeled data sets that are used to train machine learning. So machine learning is the part of artificial intelligence where instead of, giving the rules to the machines, you give machines data that they can learn from, and they come up with their own rules to kind of learn how to classify the world or understand the world around them. And so we were building these data sets for these kind of monumental companies at a scale that really couldn't be done with any off-the-shelf platform, much larger than public data sets. So we actually manually cobbled together all of the world's kind of one-off work pools. You can think of this organization of labor, 10, 20 times larger than the type of capacity you can get on Mechanical Turk. And we said, wow, this is really cool. We've got this huge work pool. And then we realized that we had to have some way of kind of not trusting any of the answers that we received because the quality was so over the mark. And so we kind of built our own kind of poor man's CAPTCHA to solve that project. And it took a couple weeks, and we were like, wow, that wasn't too bad. How hard could it be to build a CAPTCHA project? And we were like, well, how, I'm sure it'll only take us a couple months. And then, Eli, and I were saying, like, how do we get people to use it? Well, we'll pay them to use it. And we were like, great, it's going to be a couple of months. We're going to get some people to use our CAPTCHA project, and we'll take over the world. About 2 years later, we finally had our huge success, which was really when some of the world's biggest content distribution networks came over. And once that happened, we not only had people coming over, using our CAPTCHA where we paid them to work, but we also actually had people paying us to do CAPTCHA at scale, which was pretty remarkable. And so Intuition Machines really has kind of, dominated the whole bot blocking industry. I think it's, somewhere between 15 to 25% of the internet at this point. And like you said, hundreds of millions of users a month at least is kind of how we describe the amount of people. And so when we actually bootstrapped this thing, Eli and I had done venture capital before, but we were both also really early in the Bitcoin community. And so Eli pointed out that on the Bitcoin mailing list, I think it was like 2013, I'm making up the year, they actually suggested a CAPTCHA-based micropayment system. And so that mailing list was really our inspiration for, instead of kind of building that two-sided market up on VC, doing a crypto model. And we knew we couldn't really do the micropayments thing because, Ethereum and Bitcoin aren't exactly cheap and micropaymenty yet.
Mm-hmm.
But so we built our own aggregation system, our bulking system, under the assumption that we could kind of co-evolve with the blockchain. And as the blockchain gained more capability and speed, that we would be able to take advantage of that and get those features out to our user. And actually the strategy has worked kind of perfectly. What's interesting now is, CAPTCHA was really just the first application on the Human Protocol. And so now I represent the Human Protocol Foundation. It's actually a separate group from Intuition Machines. Intuition Machines, still is a great partner of the foundation, supplying hCaptcha and that whole product on top of us. But now we have a whole bunch of other companies that we've started working with, mostly in the open source space, that are other applications on top of the Human Protocol that are more, that supply an even larger amount of labeling. So when you think about the Human Protocol, the original envision wasn't just a CAPTCHA coin. Eli and my vision was really that, for all of human history, human work or work in general really hasn't been fungible. You might be able to pay someone by the hour, by the week, by the month, but it's not like people really have these kind of contracts where the individual tasks or work that you're doing are individually paid in a granular or fungible way. Mm-hmm. And once you kind of create that capability where works and humans can kind of build up tasks at arbitrary levels of complexity and fungibility, it completely changes the nature of work. So right now, we're super excited about this machine learning tasks. It's such a huge industry. But Eli often, jokes to me, and he's such a visionary, I love it, but he often jokes to me like, how cool would it be to write code one way using the Human Protocol? And so that human-machine interface, right now, we're kind of working on those building blocks, teaching computers how to see, hear, understand the world, to be more sensitive. But that's really just kind of building up those basic building blocks so we can even do more and more complicated activities built on top of the Human Protocol.
So would you say that you're building Jarvis or Ultron?
That's right. Well, so, it's really interesting. Peter Thiel had this statement where he said, machine learning is kind of like communism and blockchain is kind of like capitalism, right? And what I think he's saying is that when we think about machine learning, we imagine these centralized systems run by large companies like Google. And when we think about blockchain, we think of decentralized systems where the incentives are kind of pushed out through to everyone. The system is democratized. Anyone can kind of pay to play, whatever. Right now, if you look at the largest data companies, they're spending billions of dollars a year on labeling. No company has the capability to kind of stand up that workforce, even if they only need that capability, let's say, for a week. With the Human Protocol, we can democratize access to these tools. And so that's what we're really trying to do, is kind of be that middle between kind of a decentralized labeling system and a centralized knowledge system. And like a good way to kind of visualize this is, we always joke that truth, especially truth about the world, is almost never binary. It's always statistical. So, imagine a world where we could just reach out, the week after Donald Trump's presidency and ask, let's say, 50 people in each country, who's the president of the United States, right? And at that point, you could easily kind of conglomerate that information, say, hey, 99.4% chance that, everyone across the world thinks, Donald Trump or Biden or whoever is the president is the president. And then, you could build predictions off of it, just like you see already, but reaching out all across the world, So good, we joke that we have more languages than the UN, but last time I looked, there's something like 237 different countries are represented by hCaptcha. And so, the ability to kind of reach out there across the whole world in an unbiased way is actually kind of part of the decentralized fuel to power the centralized machine learning device. Or another way to say it is like, we want the world kind of influencing and biasing our machine learning devices and building these models, not necessarily Google. So I kind of think of us as kind of like, Google is building their own, Jarvis, I guess. And what we're really trying to do is kind of make sure that we put forth a system and standards so that technology to build that intelligence isn't just in the hands of the biggest individual.
Absolutely, and I love that premise. So what I want to do, because I have a lot of things I'm going to be exploring with you, but before we do any of that, because the main premise of crypto and blockchain talk is really making people understand the basic elements of everything we're talking about so that they can get the full picture. So hCaptCHA, even when you go to hCaptCHA.com, it says right there on the webpage, stop more bots, start protecting user privacy. And then you have a very short description on how it's basically a drop-in replacement for reCAPTCHA, which is Google's product.
Yep.
You have written here that hCaptCHA has grown to be the largest independent cybersecurity service in the world, running on about 15% of the internet. Now, those are big numbers. We're talking a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you're taking this market share directly from Google reCAPTCHA. And then you say at hCaptCHA, we've deliberately taken a very different approach using privacy-preserving machine learning techniques to identify typical bot behaviors at high accuracy, all while consuming and storing as little data as possible. So just out of interest, can I ask, how are you how are you collecting this data?
So one of the nice parts about launching in San Francisco, there's no headquarters anymore, but back when people used to have indoor meetings, you could actually just invite the EFF over to give you advice on how to be more private. Electronic Freedom Foundation members would come over and say, okay, tell me about your system. Here's how we can kind of suggest practices that'll maximize the privacy for our user. We worked with one of their researchers there, and they suggested, hey, the do not track policy that isn't respected by a lot of websites actually has carve-outs for fraud detection and bot detection. And it was really designed with people like you in mind. So even though we can't get any of the big companies to actually follow it, if you guys actually follow it, it would be a pretty good rules of the road. And that was really what inspired us. Early on, we made the decision that the co-founders would answer, the Twitter and the customer support, get the best advice possible on privacy, and kind of pick those two early on. And that's just the values of the co-founders, the people who are running the company. Mm-hmm. Eli and I have had many startups before. We have to live in this world. We would like it to be a nice one. And the reality of the situation, and I had worked with Brendan Ike at Brave for a short period and stuff like that. So, I've kind of been on a privacy kick myself for a long time. But the reality is once you're on the inside and you see what data is really collected about you, it gets pretty easy to be privacy conscious and to accept a reasonable standard like do not track. So what do not track says is that you can collect the data, you can look for bot, and when we say what we collect on our privacy policy, and then we analyze it to see if there is any bot data in there or any fraud or bot data, someone trying to bypass the CAPTCHA. And that's really the only signatures or data that we keep long term. There's certain types of internet infrastructure, or I should say that Intuition Machines hCaptCHA does, because that's really at that point really their focus, and they try to do that in the most privacy respecting way in terms of everything as nonchalant as like an IP address or any of that stuff. They kind of handle it with the highest level of privacy standards. And yeah, it makes a huge deal to our users. Turns out that there's nothing about running a CAPTCHA service that means that you can't follow the do not track policy for everyone, whether they have it turned on or not. It's a little bit of a difficulty to run a CAPTCHA service that's actually a stealth marketing company and respect people's privacy. So by us being just a actual cybersecurity company and not a stealth advertisement company, we don't want to keep the data for you. It just makes it expensive. The only data we want to keep are the baddies. And, I think no one really minds if we keep, the history of people committing fraud or trying to bot websites and stuff like that. Bots don't have privacy, just people.
There's a couple of things which I also want to address before we go on to the human protocol. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was when we're talking about privacy and the next wave of the web, the internet, there's something coming on, looming like a monster on the horizon, and it's called the deep fake. Right. And the deep fakes, I think, are going to come in and become quite a headache for many people. I don't even mean just in terms of fake news. I mean in terms of doing some pretty disturbing things to people's lives. That's just from what I really truly believe. When I think about all of the knowledge in your head and what you have the ability to do in terms of user privacy and stopping functionality, stopping bots or whatever, do you guys have, or do you yourself actually think about deep fake and how you can use any of this technology to combating that in the future?
This is an awesome question. I'm so pleasantly surprised you asked it. One of the great things about the Human Protocol Foundation is the goal of the foundation is to support the protocol. And part of that means assuring that the protocol is used in a safe way. If you read about the safety requirements that our validator provides, there's a wide range of kind of safety that it's trying to provide, including, hey, we don't want to put, gore on the CAPTCHA chain. We don't want to put up a link that's going to break when someone, tries to view that CAPTCHA. But we also are working with some of the top ML scientists in the world on one kind of how, on kind of the ML safety issues. And my personal belief is that the two most dangerous safety issues right now is one, the deepfake issue that you brought up, and two, code which can write code to hack into computers. Mm-hmm. These two threats are like society-ending threats. I think Elon Musk has pointed out how dangerous this stuff is. And you got to figure when someone like Elon Musk is on TV saying like, yeah, I think this needs to be regulated. Yeah, I think we should bring in the deep state. Like he probably thought about that. And he probably knows a lot more than most people about this problem. We work really closely with research to kind of deal with all of the values problems with in machine learning. So some of the stuff that we're focused on in the short term are really around how do we make models less racist? How do we make models more energy efficient? Those are kind of some of the short-term goals that we have some projects on. But we also do have some intent on working on these deeper safety issues like deep fake. One interesting fact you might consider in deep fake land is that it is significantly different to fake audio than to fake video. And people will find in the ML literature that there's training data for images and to some extent video, but much less so flexible audio training data sets. And this is because of a big problem, in my opinion, in the industry, which is there are a lot of research institutions that believe that they have created an ML model so dangerous that they cannot share it or allow other people to kind of work with them on it. In the case of audio, even under like kind of traditional research embargo. So in the case of GPT-3, I think OpenAI did a great job, worked with some smart people to figure out, okay, this is some huge technology. How do we limit the damage from it? And they worked with kind of the best people in the world who are external to their organization to minimize the damage that it caused while maximizing the benefit to society. Large corporations tend not to do that. And they tend to be very protective of that technology. And I think that that's really something that has two sides of the problem where, on one hand, I understand that people are worried that if they have some large audio data set, that I'm not going to name the company, but I can tell you it's one of the top companies in the world. Mm-hmm. And they believe if they shared it that someone might accidentally wake up a computer, that we're going to accidentally get AGI. And I'm very skeptical of these claims.
Yeah.
Just like I'm very skeptical of, when GPT first came out and they were saying it's so dangerous we couldn't release it, I was the first one to be like, hey, this is a marketing ploy. We've got a model so great we can't release it. And I think, OpenAI really showed that they were good at kind of navigating that in a responsible research organization type way. But the large corporations are so secretive. I don't know if it's for recruitment, but that's why foundations like us are really the right place for this type of, as I call, defense to be built up. Ultimately, the only way I think that we're going to be able to tackle this deepfake problem and the code which can write code to hack people problem. And mind you, a very kind of famous form of hacking is called social engineering. So imagine a program so smart that it could call people up and impersonate people and then also hack at the same time, right? Imagine how dangerous that would be, and maybe it's programmed to collect all the dollars in the world, maybe it's just someone trying to make money. So I think like these types of threats require real investments in terms of defense and offense to kind of protect the world. And yeah, we work closely on this, and that's part of our goal is to provide the machine learning capability, the labeling capability, so that we can actually power and build those types of projects, because ultimately, it's not any one of these big ML companies' jobs to solve these problems.
No.
It's really more set up for, some type of public-private partnership and consortium work.
I think that if my hope was going to be best placed somewhere, it would be placed with you and your foundation. I really hope that this is something where you can address this and use all of the brilliance that you've already put into hCaptCHA and the next thing we're going to talk about, which is actually human protocol. I really think that people don't even understand yet how bad this can be, because people believe what they see, even more than what they hear, even more than what they read. And if you're seeing it, you're believing it, and it can be some pretty wild stuff that can be released. And it can ruin a lot of people's lives, if not take them. But that is...
Let me just jump in there, because I think there's an interesting point I just want to drop, which is I think this Texas thing that just happened really shows, this power outage, really shows that our whole society is secretly, on the edge of some serious problems. And it's actually individuals, this small percentage of the society, whether it's the guy who's the expert on engineering power lines or transformers or whatever, that end up being these kind of silent heroes. And when nothing goes wrong, no one thinks about it. And I think this is just another one of those issues where ultimately, the insurance companies, the government, the military, everyone's going to have to figure out some way to make sure that that things are balanced on the side of safety. Ultimately, none of this stuff is never, ever going to be totally safe. Human beings are just rapidly becoming more powerful. But, when you take a look at, like, say, this malware thing that I brought up, we already have rules about what precursors you can ship when it comes to biological, right? You can't ship Ebola precursor to a high school classroom. And there's a reason for that, right? And I think that, that type of stuff, I think is kind of the first step, and that's going to happen. But ultimately, it's really kind of the training of this silent heroes, as I call them. And I think those are going to be very young people who kind of know how to think about these things systematically. I think ultimately that's, as painful and as hard as it sounds, I think it's ultimately that difficult to solve these problems.
Absolutely. And those are some pretty good analogies. So, on a happier note, going over to Human Protocol. So humanprotocol.org. You have on there Unlock the World's Workforce. And then you have two beautiful big buttons on this gorgeous website which say Set Tasks or Get Paid.
Right now we're focused on perception.
Okay.
And perception really comes down to really images and text, right? We need to be able to do more with less labeled data. So even if Human Protocol, is pulling and labeling billions of images a day, you think of a baby or an animal, like it's constantly undergoing some type of, seeing something or hearing something or smelling something. It's constantly training it. So we need at least that much labeled data. We also need kind of society to be constantly improving the efficiency of how we use this data. But what the human protocol's goal is really just right now kind of providing that bottom level data and slowly working up from one problem to the next to be more about sentiment. So what do I mean by sentiment? So like a kind of dumb thing that anything can do is to say, tell me all the objects in the photo. And you might say, oh, there's a chicken over here and a dog over here and a fence over here. But a much more human thing to ask is, here's a whole image. Give me 5 words, or a sentence that describes that image, the whole context, right? And so you may have a picture where, 80% of the pixels are the roof or the floor, and, maybe only 20% of the picture is a train, but you still want to say, I'm in a train station, Like even though the train is a small amount of pixels, it's still, obviously the important part about saying what's going on in that image. So that's really kind of the steps we're taking now on the human protocol, is moving from questions like, click on all the cats to what's going on in this picture, type of sentence. And that allows us to kind of train that kind of next level of context, right? Because ultimately, we want these machines to be more social. We want them to have context. We want to be able to talk to them more fluidly. And so that is kind of where we are in terms of the job complexity level. And then we have kind of capabilities across all sorts of categories. So you can ask someone to enter in a sentence, like I said before, who's the president, right? Is this shirt long sleeves or short sleeves? Which sounds like a simple question that you should be able to ask in ML and it'll tell you the answer. But it turns out what's interesting about this question is that you get a different answer depending on who you ask. So if you ask someone in the Netherlands whether or not a shirt is short-sleeved, and you ask someone in Saudi Arabia whether this woman's shirt is short-sleeved, you might get totally different answers. And that context, that statistical information, is not only valuable for training models, it's also just valuable for commerce. If a big retail company has people coming from a Middle Eastern, world, they want to know what shirts to display to them. That's kind of, I think, the overview. You can kind of think of all the tasks that we can do, but we can have people click on images. We can have people draw bounding boxes. We can have people write sentences. One of the things that we did recently that was really interesting is to ask people to click on which face is most similar to another face. All of these types of things can be used to build up kind of the basic cognition levels. And as we add more and more applications, so right now, the 3 applications on the human protocol, one of them is obviously our flagship CAPTCHA project. Number 2, there's actually a tool out of Intel called CVAT that we're currently looking at integrating on the human protocol. And that's designed for full-time image labeling. So instead of a user solving a task in CAPTCHAs, there's just a dedicated image labeling system they can use, and it actually helps automate their work. We found out there were just a lot of people in our CAPTCHA system solving CAPTCHAs all day free to get paid. And so we wanted to give them some platform so they could be more efficient with their time.
I'm confused. Why are people being paid to full-time click on CAPTCHAs?
That's right.
Why?
Yeah. Well, we pay websites to solve CAPTCHAs, right? So there are websites who have said, I'll put up a special website, track users, to just solve CAPTCHAs all day. I'll track how many they solve and pay out our best users. We pay the website, and then they pay their users labeling.
Do you want to give a URL to one of these websites? I think our listeners would love to know where they can get paid.
There's actually a whole bunch of crypto sites, that crypto-oriented, like faucet sites and stuff like that use hCaptcha. And we're actually super excited about the new offering that we're going to be getting them to kind of have an even more full-fledged interface where they can get paid more. So that's absolutely something that we're interested in scaling up. Frankly, my dream, now that the chains are actually getting fast enough, is to actually have programs where users can get paid when they solve the CAPTCHA directly. Imagine a world where a crypto wallet in every web browser, and as you have to solve a CAPTCHA, you get paid the micropayment directly for it. Or if you're answering surveys, anything where you're providing work for the human protocol. So you can imagine a crypto project just wants to educate a large portion of their society about their project. They could just launch a job, and every single one of those users that learns about their project, they could pay out.
I love that idea very much.
Super excited about prediction markets. There are all sorts of great prediction market infrastructure already that we can give new sources of data to and just kind of plug into. All of this wonderful human intelligence online, we want to get it all into one place, because ultimately, it's all about Metcalfe's law. So what is Metcalfe's law? Imagine a social network that only has two people in it, right? Well, there's only one conversation that can be had. But as soon as you add a third person, person one can talk to person two can talk to person three can talk to person one, and all three of them can talk together. So by adding one person, you've more than quadrupled the amount of conversations that happen. Once you add a fourth person, it keeps on going up exponentially. Bitcoin and Ethereum in many ways resemble financial social networks. Whereas the number of users goes up, the value increases. In our case, we're doing the same thing, where it's not just the amount of work that's going into the system that increases the value exponentially, but the variety of the tasks, because the varieties can be mixed together like a cocktail to do more and more complicated human actions. So as we add more applications, as we add more users, as we kind of branch out and build this great place for people who are building open source or closed source software to get paid to run on top of our protocol, it causes the value of the work network to grow exponentially. And the way I always say it is, we'll know we've succeeded when Google comes over and brings reCAPTCHA over. And, I was saying this a year ago to people, and it sounded kind of arrogant, but I think there's a lot of reasons why even Google would benefit hugely by incorporating their CAPTCHA network into the human protocol. We would never want to block a great company like that from kind of engaging and kind of adding their work to the work pool that the rest of the world can partake in. So we're super psyched about kind of this story about how we're really, just like there's financial social networks with Bitcoin, that we're ultimately a knowledge social network. Imagine when there's radiologists on the human protocol labeling data. I was recently talking to an anthropologist about the history of disease in the Ottoman Empire, and visualize a pyramid of work where on the top are the users who are kind of verified, they've been trained, they might even have credentials, they might have some type of insurance, and then at the bottom of the pyramid is the CAPTCHA. And the CAPTCHA, it's across 237 languages, more countries than the UN, it's just ginormous work pool. And so what you want to do to solve a problem is you want to slice up this pyramid and kind of take the right amounts from each step. So that way you can kind of not only put experts on the problem, but also make sure that you have enough people who are unbiased. You can look at the short sleeve shirt from the point of view of the whole world.
I noticed at the top of your webpage, the one for humanprotocol.org, that you've tokenized yourself. So I just want to talk to you about that for a minute, because you can't really have a token without a blockchain, or a coin without a blockchain. So it says HMT. I'm thinking this is a token. So whose blockchain are you using?
That's a great question. So we've been running on the Ethereum testnet for a little, I think the most recent contract was about 5 months. We've done about 3 factories on the Ethereum testnet. It's been a little over a year. We never were able to really kind of get the whole system launched onto Ethereum for 2 major reasons. One is just the cost per transaction of Ethereum. So currently our users are actually what happens is there's a wallet for every single account in our system. And then the money actually flows into that account. And then we actually have a separate system for users to check out over PayPal, and where we as Intuition Machines. The Human Protocol Foundation is actually right now, as we speak, is in the process of giving users direct control of private keys and allowing them to check out. We've actually had submissions on other blockchains, actually submitted by other teams from Scale. Parity from Polkadot built a main chain. Solana also built a main chain. Algorand has submitted a basic token design. Moonbeam as well has also done a sidechain design for us. So all of these are actually right now in the process of us doing what we're calling a bake-off, although we're not convinced it's going to be kind of a winner-take-all. First, we're evaluating Ethereum sidechain alternatives to the testnet, because, as long as Ethereum is 95% of all the dApps, we're going to keep that infrastructure running. So we are going to look to move the book portion that does all the task tracking onto one of these better sidechain protocols. So we'll be testing some work on those side chains. But the big event is the main chain work. So actually providing other chains to do payouts. Obviously, chains like Solana and Polkadot are so fast that it actually allows a lot of that micropayment stuff that we were looking to do in the past. So we're super excited about kind of fully integrating into those types of ecosystems and putting load onto each one of those chains. We're going to be putting up the metrics and statistics about how each chain did on our wiki. Some point, probably in Q3, we'll be deciding on kind of, how we want to allocate load based on those results. It is possible that we will never have a single chain that kind of to rule them all. The reason for this is some people might prefer certain privacy advantages. Some people might prefer being paid out over a specific chain or have a specific exchange that they want to check out in. So we've really designed the decentralized system from the ground up to have our HMT token work multiple chains. It's in a non-custodial manner. We're not custodian for it, but also to provide this upgrade to these new chains so that way we can take advantage of all the features. So we're super excited to be releasing on all these other chains. And it was really interesting because, they really came to us. They were so excited about the human protocol. They said, wow, love what you're doing with multi-chain. Let's make sure our implementation gets in there so that way we can start putting load over there. And it really allows them to kind of compete on the technical side to see, who's going to, really push forward technically the hard enough to get the load, basically. Because I think, they're excited about our users. They're excited about the use case. And so, that's great for us because we can be like, okay, great, be the fastest chain or be the most available chain, be the most decentralized chain. We're curious about what these chains' goals are for CO2 neutrality by 2030. And a couple other kind of high value stuff, but we really are getting them involved to help, set that criteria. And we're going to do it in an open source way where all the metrics, all the telemetry, all the decision making is just going to be listed on the wiki. And people will be able to see why we're putting jobs on one chain versus another.
You named some amazing blockchains there, and I'm fans of some of them. You talked about Polkadot, obviously you talked about Scale. I guess my question would be, knowing the kind of brain power you guys have over there, why wouldn't you just develop your own blockchain? So instead of trying to kind of balance out the things that some of these have and don't have, such as high gas fees, slow transaction times, et cetera, why don't you guys just build your own beautiful solution?
Well, it's interesting because we have our own notion of validators and safety of the network. So we don't necessarily rely on an external blockchain for anything other than just being a digital ledger, a public digital ledger. And then we kind of start with that prototype. And we use the fact that that digital ledger allows us to publicly say who we're paying and what work was done to create safety at kind of a higher level of the abstraction. So they've kind of done the hard work to get us that public DLT. And then we have to kind of stand on top of that and say, okay, how do we make sure that these images that are coming in to be labeled are safe to actually show to someone's browser? And we're not going to, show them something horrible, right? So that's kind of the safety level that we're building on. And we just take for granted that there's some public DLT that we can put actually write to. And I think when we first started down this path, Ethereum was the only kind of realistic decentralized blockchain. We just kind of said, well, this is good enough. I'm sure it'll get cheaper and faster. ETH2 is right around the corner. We were focusing on building on top of the stack, not at the bottom. But now, actually, the blockchain options are great, and if one's not good enough, then two or three will. So I think that, the wait-and-see attitude turned out to be the right thing. It's actually funny because, as I said, my background is in distributed system design. I built 3 consensus systems in a past life. And I will tell you that, it's a whole startup on its own. You definitely want kind of the best people building it. We're engineers, so we're like, a CAPTCHA system. How hard could that be? Take us a couple months, 3 years later, right? And yeah, exactly. 2 years later, 3 years later. But, it's 3 years now. But yeah, I mean, I guess 4. Wow, time flies. But yeah, so I think that, that's really the way I think of it is like, maybe one day, but by the time we get there, I'm hoping that our blockchain brethren have got the problem solved.
I'm hoping they will too. Listen, things are moving so fast in this space. So, you're using oracles. Okay, so let's first talk about what an oracle is, everyone. Now, there is a podcast on oracles themselves, but oracles are a way for blockchains to basically find the information on the internet and authenticate external data sources. Human protocol, it says here, uses 2 types of oracle. So just out of interest, who's building the oracles then?
Yeah. Actually, so secretly there are three oracles, and I'll say what they are.
There's a secret
and
third
kind of,
oracle, folks. You heard
yeah,
it here
yeah.
first.
There's actually three, and I'll explain why there are three and what's going on. So actually, our oracles are a little bit different than traditional oracles. So traditional oracles are pulling information over the web and putting it into blockchain. Our oracles are more like what Chainlink calls an initiator external adapter pattern. So there's basically three oracles we have. So one of them is what we call the exchange oracle. And that, by exchange, we mean exchanging between humans and machines. So that could be, for instance, our North American CAPTCHA system or our Asian CAPTCHA system. Each one of those will be a different, will have its own exchange oracle to pull jobs and to mark updates on jobs, for it to do work. So it'll pull the job of the CAPTCHA system and it'll hand out those tasks to users. That's all the exchange oracle's job. The recording oracle, which is the second oracle, all it's supposed to do is record the results that the exchange oracle has produced. So as the questions come in, the recording oracle is writing down the results. And there's actually, it does this little trick where as it's writing down the answer, it makes sure to reserve the money in the smart contract that people have paid for the job. So that way, people can't have things being answered and then hit the cancel button and get the answers for free. So the recording oracle really has these two jobs of recording answers and reserving money for work that's already been done. Finally, there's the reputation oracle. And the reputation oracle is the thing that's doing the real-time payments. So it's the thing that's looking at the results from the recording oracle and then saying, okay, I know the reputation of all these different websites. This website, it's super accurate. I'm going to pay him out at 100%. This website, it's a little new. I don't know how much I'm really going to pay him out. I'm going to scale down his payouts to be less. And so the more that they answer questions and the more that we're trusted, the more than we can kind of pay them out for each answer, the more they're worth. And so this hierarchy of reputation oracle, recording oracle, and exchange oracle also serves an additional role where the reputation oracle, it actually has 100% of the pre-known answers in the job. So it only gives some amount of those pre-known answers, what we call ground truth, to the recording oracle. So while the recording oracle, I should say, the recording oracle also does this with the exchange. When the recording oracle hands out work to the exchange only doesn't have as many pre-known answers as the recording oracle. So that means some of the tasks the recording oracle hands out to the exchange, it knows the answer to, and the exchange doesn't. And it can check to make sure that it's acting honestly. The reputation oracle can watch the recording oracle and make sure that it is acting honestly. So the exchange is distributed in the sense that it's like a federation where we've got, Intel, soon to be running, hopefully, CVAT. We've got, this other German university they're working with on the Inception project. We've got all these different websites. Each one of them has their own accuracy and reputation. And so it's kind of like a hodgepodge federation at that exchange oracle level. And that's kind of how it's decentralized, is that, anyone can kind of run an exchange and add it to the protocol. The recording oracle is, like I said, it's mostly around just returning results and checking the exchange's work. So we hope one day that, every cloud will run a recording oracle and there'll just be one built into every cloud. The reputation oracle is kind of the core of the network. It really decides how to payments and all that type of stuff. There's not a lot of trust in the reputation oracle because it's constantly paying out. So it's not like it's holding on to a lot of money. But it is something that we're looking right now at migrating actually over to a Chainlink external adapter and an initiator pattern. So that way we can get, a bit more decentralization. Anyone can run that reputation oracle. And also it'll help make sure that we can pay out in different chains. So right now, like I said, our big goal is to get more apps on the exchange oracle, to get more protocols of the reputation oracle to pay out, plug it in Chainlink. And then in the long term, like I said, I'd love every cloud to run a recording oracle. And that's really how we want the network decentralized. So we kind of built it up where we're running all of these oracles. So that way we could kind of build this healthy network. And now our goal is to kind of give it all away and allow people to get paid to run those components for us.
So, Alex, I want to thank you so much for coming on to Crypto and Blockchain Talk. I really find everything that you and all of your colleagues are doing phenomenal.
Well, thanks so much.
I would just like to thank all of our listeners for listening to this week's Crypto and Blockchain Talk. Please do not forget to tell your friends and family to download us on one of the many podcasting platforms that are listed on cryptoandblockchaintalk.com. Again, don't forget that these podcasts are streamed onto our sister radio station, crypto24radio.com. That's crypto24radio.com. We love to hear from you, and of course, we have our social media platforms with our accounts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, but we love to hear from you directly. So please email us at education@savvydigital, that's education@savvy, SAVII digital.com. Again, thank you for tuning in. We love having you as our listener. So please be safe, take care, and goodbye for now.